Earlier on Tuesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed to halt attacks on energy infrastructure targets in Ukraine for 30 days after a phone call with US President Donald Trump. Putin ordered the Russian military to stop strikes against energy facilities following a lengthy phone call between the two leaders on Tuesday, but he stopped short of accepting a broader US-backed 30-day ceasefire proposal that Ukraine has said it is ready to implement. Putin declined to sign up to the comprehensive month-long ceasefire that Trump's team recently worked out with Ukrainians in Saudi Arabia. He said a comprehensive truce could only work if foreign military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine came to an end. Ukraine's European allies have previously rejected such conditions. The Kremlin said after the Trump-Putin call that Putin also emphasized that any resolution of the conflict would require an end to all military and intelligence assistance to Ukraine. Trump said that he didn't discuss Western aid to Ukraine during a call.
Actually, we didn't talk about aid at all. We talked about a lot of things, but aid was never discussed. We're going to be friendly with both. I think we're going to be friendly with both. China needs us in terms of trade very badly, but we have to straighten out the deficit. We have now more than $1 trillion deficit with China. It's not even believable. And we're going to be doing something about that. And with Russia, they would like to have some of our economic power.
Meanwhile, Ukraine has accused Russia of effectively rejecting a US-backed ceasefire proposal, reporting a barrage of strikes on civilian infrastructure hours after Moscow agreed only to pause attacks on the energy grid. Zelensky, however, welcomed the proposed energy truce, but said he needed more details from Washington. In Kiev, the Ukrainians were doubtful of any concessions from Putin. And DD India correspondent Anil Thomas is joining us live from New Delhi. Hi Anil, a very good morning to you. First things first, the devil is in the details. We have got a team going to Saudi Arabia, led by a national security advisor and a secretary of state. And I think, we've got to figure out the details. This is what US envoy Steve Witkoff told Fox News. What can we understand by this?
Well, good morning, Siddharth. Well, very much on expected lines. Remember, this particular deal from the time that Ukraine had agreed for it, the world was talking about the devil in the details. And I think one needs to understand what exactly are these talks in Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia, going to be all about. It's going to involve Russia, Ukraine, as well as United States. Let's look at, this particular temporary ceasefire agreement that's been done. Has this agreement been agreed by Ukraine? Yes, it has been. So what are the next steps that are possible? The next steps are, you take it forward to a talks. Delegations from the involved countries will convene there. They will discuss on the implications of this particular temporary ceasefire. Remember, this particular ceasefire is only on energy infrastructure.
Correct.
Also explore possibilities that could be there for a more comprehensive peace plan that needs to come into place. Not only that, also the maritime, ceasefire discussions. That's still not very much clear on what exactly happens to the maritime ceasefire discussions, because, this agenda of this particular deliberations in Jeddah could also, extend to the maritime ceasefire that needs to come into place in the Black Sea. Remember, because it will involve the opening of safe passage for commercial as well as commercial vessels in the first place, and also, with passengers. And it could also stabilize the region on a larger scale. So these are important issues that need to also to be considered. Let's not forget Russia's position. Russia's position has been, they have agreed for this temporary halt when it comes to energy infrastructure attacks. But Russia is still not committed for a full ceasefire, indicating that, further negotiations are very much necessary on this particular development.
Indeed, Anil. And, let's talk about what just happened. It was a lengthy phone call between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, after which Putin agreed to halt attacks on energy infrastructure, like you were just mentioning, infrastructure targets in Ukraine for 30 days. What more can you tell us about this?
See, remember, this is a long phone call. It's almost 2.5 hours. That's roughly around 150 minutes, that the two world leaders have spoken on. There has been an agreement, especially when it comes to a pause on attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. But Russia is also demanding that Western countries should stop supplying weapons to Ukraine for a broader ceasefire to come into play. I think that's where the catch is, because as these talks have taken place, as these deals have agreed, these ceasefire, so-called temporary ceasefires have agreed, Russia is attacked. one particular area in Ukraine when these talks and when these ceasefire talks have almost been concreted. So there is doubt in the minds of everybody about Russia's commitment, as previous ceasefires have rather been short-lived or violated by Russia. And Ukraine and its allies will also remain cautious about the developments that have taken place, because this temporary ceasefire, does not have a long-lasting rope that looks at somewhere giving lasting peace to Ukraine. Remember, all this, if you take a flashback, the Minsk agreement, if it had been signed, we would not have seen all this. So it's back and forth. You listen to the Boris Johnson podcast, the former British Prime Minister's podcast today, where he speaks about how the Minsk agreement, if it had been signed, all these problems that the world is facing between Russia and Ukraine would have been a chapter in history. But having said all that, let's still wait for how things transpire. Indeed. Because the European Union does not trust Russia, and I think Russia needs to get that trust back from the European Union. I think that's the big catch that Russia has. But Russia will be looking at sanctions that they are facing for long, that they will be lifted, and they can look forward to getting their house in order during this temporary ceasefire phase.
Indeed, Anil, you said it right. Russia needs to earn their trust when it comes to European Union. So, Anil, as of now, no attacks on energy infrastructure for 30 days. But why is Putin refusing to accept a month-long ceasefire? How do you analyze that?
Well, it's very simple. Let's understand why Putin is trying to do this. This particular agreement that Putin has agreed to, why is he looking at it? He's simply begging. He's simply asking for time. Remember, this duration of this call, as we spoke, 2.5 hours. Partial ceasefire. Why? Because that's where all the action is. Ukraine has been crying foul that our energy installations have been time and again attacked.
Correct.
So Russia has put those conditions in play. We are not going to attack your energy infrastructure. Let's be very clear on that. Maritime discussions still continue, but the conditions that Russia has set, no Western nations cannot supply any kind of military alliance or any kind of military assistance, clearly leaves a window that Russia is getting its house back in order. They are looking for regrouping, and they need some time to regroup. They also understand that for a longer or a comprehensive ceasefire to come into play, the Western nations have to somewhere be brought back on board. And I think the challenges that Russia faces are simply because, even as this deal is through, they are not going to stick to it, to the T. They will bring about some kind of tweaks and changes. They would say, we have attacked this area, we have attacked that area. Those areas don't matter. So it's almost similar. But if you are just taking it giving it a broader picture, if one may say so, the broader picture is there is a fragility when it comes to all these ceasefires. Secondly, one puts that, an immediate conflict that Israel and Gaza is seeing. In Ukraine, Russia's conditions for a broader ceasefire involve basically halting Western aid. But in the Israel-Hamas story, you'll see there is a lot of internal political dynamics that are influencing the decision. So Russia has very much things under control. It's for Russia to now play the game the way they want it. They know that they are in a position of strength, looking at the territorial advantage they have, and they are going to push that to the limits. They are going to push Ukraine to the wall, and Ukraine understands it really well. So Ukraine is keeping that rare minerals wala story still very much alive. So they have some kind of bargaining tool that US might support them with military as well as humanitarian aid. Remember, this entire talk, there is still no talk of any kind of humanitarian or military aid that US provides, even though they are the main negotiators in this talk. And I think that's where Ukraine feels a bit exposed, and that's where Russia feels they have an upper hand.
Well, that's wonderfully put, Anil, and I'm sure our viewers clearly understood what happened and what is to be expected. But as of now, we leave it there. Thank you so much.